The cosine rule. Now, the cosine rule is very specific. The cosine rule actually has a test, and the test is that if you have two angles, or two sides rather, and the angle in between, you have the information to use the cosine rule. Now, that's the only test you get when you're doing trigonometry, but it is useful because the cosine rule, you can check in advance, is this a cosine rule question? If it's not a cosine rule question, it will be a sine rule question. So if you have those two sides and the angle in between, which we have here, this is a cosine rule question. So keep that in mind, it's very, very important. So the cosine rule itself looks like that. Now, that's what you get in your formula sheet, but the most important part to remember in the cosine rule is that the first letter and the last letter have to be the same, and the other two letters just slot into the other two positions. So let's do this example. We have a triangle ABC. We have sides 17 and 24 centimetres, and we have an angle of 34 degrees. Now, from that, we want to work out the length of AC. So the first thing to notice, after we have labelled our triangle, the first thing to notice is that side AC is actually letter B. So we're going to look at calculating letter B, which means that when you're writing out the cosine rule, that's how you start it. B squared at the beginning, cos B at the end. And that means that the other two sides, A and C, just fit in there. Okay, so if you always do it like that, or at least you're aware of that, you're never going to go wrong with the cosine rule. Now the next thing, we have three calculations to do here. It's very important that you write down those three calculations separately. So you're going to have 24 squared plus 17 squared minus 2 times 24 times 17 times cos of 34 degrees. So that's us filling in all of our information. Now, I really would strongly suggest that you write these down individually. So that will give us 576 plus 289 minus 676.5. Now again, do the calculation, make sure you're getting those answers. You have three separate numbers, it breaks down easily. Don't try and do the whole thing in your calculator, that's just asking for trouble. So we do that, and that gives us 188.5. Now, of course, the final step of the cosine rule is that we take the square root, because this was b squared, so therefore we will end up with 13.7 centimetres. Simple. Okay, now, there is a catch to the cosine rule. Now, the catch to the cosine rule comes in when you are using an obtuse angle. So this time we're going to use 126 degrees. We're going to have E, F and G. So that's F, that's E, that's G. And our two sides are going to be 14 and 23. Okay, so this time we want to work out F. Now the situation that comes up, cos of 126 will give you a negative answer. Check that in your calculator just now, it will give you a negative answer, and because you're aware of that, what happens is that when we use the cosine rule, this is going to be negative. Because that's negative as well, we're going to end up with an addition here instead of a subtraction, which means we're going to get a bigger answer than perhaps we might expect. So if we're looking for that in advance, we don't have the problem. So we're looking for, we want to find side F. So we're going to do F squared equals, and again finishing off with cos F, that's going to be E squared plus G squared minus 2EG cos F. So that's going to be 23 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 23 times 14 times cos 126. Now again, doing this separately will give us 529 plus 196 minus, and then this is going to be negative as well, 378.5 to one decimal place. The one decimal place, remember, is fine. As we do the calculation, these two of course will turn into a plus, so that's going to end up giving us an answer of 1103.5. So f will be the square root of 1103.5, which turns out to be 33.2 centimetres. Okay, so cosine rule, simple enough to use, just be careful, separate it out into simple steps, don't try and do the whole thing in your calculator or you really will get it wrong. And finally, if you've got an obtuse angle more than 90 degrees, watch out for the plus sign coming in here. It's no longer going to be a subtraction. Okay, simple.